Practically every movie ever released has been cut down extensively from its original rough cut, and editors are often given a helping hand by way of test screenings with random members of the public who generally don't know what they're about to watch. The feedback from these screenings further helps shape the edit, for better or worse, and whether they were deemed too graphic or depressing, the following scenes were all denied to general viewers because of those pesky test audiences. I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 10 horror movie scenes you didn't see thanks to test audiences. Number 10, Preacher Dies, Deep Blue Sea. Alright, before we start dunking on test audiences outright, let's first kick things off with a rare instance of a test screening that almost certainly produced a better result, even if it's a shame that the cut material has never been released. Rennie Harlin's shamelessly schlocky 1999 B-movie Deep Blue Sea features a memorable performance from LL Cool J as Sherman Preacher Dudley, the underwater lab's resident chef who gets fiery revenge on the shark that ate his bird. Yes, really. In an original test screening though, Preacher actually died fairly early in the film. Yet because the audience was so pervasively disappointed by his demise while the unlikable Dr. Susan McAllister got to live, their fates were actually reversed through reshoots. In the end, Preacher is a major part of the refilmed climax and narrowly survives, while McAllister is brutally devoured shortly before the end. Number 9, Newt's graphic autopsy, Alien 3. If you know anything about Alien 3, you'll probably be aware that the film's production was a massive headache, as director David Fincher went to war with Fox executives over the final cut, causing him to eventually disown it outright as his scenes were cut and changed. One such scene is the full gory autopsy of young Newt. While we do see Clemens conducting Newt's autopsy in the theatrical cut, it has been edited to remove most close-up glimpses of Newt's dead body, as was deemed unpalatable during test screenings. According to visual effects artist Alec Gillis, who received an Oscar nomination for his work on the film by the way, Fincher very intently wanted to make the scene graphic to let audiences know what they were in for. He said, quote, "It's one thing to kill Newt's character, and it's even more disturbing to dissect her. But that scene is part of David Fincher's brutal world. It's been cut down with each preview, and he uses the autopsy to show audiences that Alien 3 isn't going to be a fun experience." End quote. Makeup artist Greg Canham also confirmed how even he found the original iteration of the scene utterly nauseating, saying, quote, "There was an autopsy scene on the girl that I like certain gore in films. I do it and it made me sick. It really grossed me out, and I remember that people got up and left, walked out of the theater at the time, and I was just thinking, this'll never be in the film. They can't show this stuff, it was just too much." End quote. Number 8, The Homeless Men Massacre, An American Werewolf in London. A brief scene in John Landis's horror classic An American Werewolf in London sees a group of 3 homeless men warming themselves by the Thames as they're attacked by the titular werewolf, though the gory outcome is kept firmly off screen. Landis did originally film a longer sequence though, which actually shows the men being savagely torn apart by the werewolf, though test audiences reacted with intense negativity to it, perhaps feeling it excessively cruel to linger on the suffering of people already living on the fringes of society. So Landis decided to cut the brutal end result, a decision which he came to regret alongside other edits he made in order to secure the film an R rating. An American Werewolf in London is still a fantastic and plenty gory film regardless of course, but this scene is certainly something fans would love to see restored or released online at some point, assuming the footage even still exists 40 years later. Number 7, The Full Bloody Orgy, Event Horizon. There are few jettisoned horror movie scenes more infamous than the bloody orgy sequence from Paul W.S. Anderson's cult classic sci-fi romp, Event Horizon. The film features a memorable scene where the crew of the Lewis and Clark view a video log of the abandoned Event Horizon's crew, which fleetingly shows them partaking in sexually violent acts and mutilating one another. However, this sequence was originally much longer and part of 35 minutes' worth of material that was removed after test screenings complained it was either too long or too graphically violent. Much of the lengthier bloody orgy was filmed by second unit director Vadim Jean, and porn actors were hired to perform the more demanding simulated sexual activities. Sadly, there's a 0 chance of the full scene ever being released because the only surviving remnants of footage are in too poor a condition. Number 6, Luke Remains a Mouse, The Witches, 1990. As incredible as Nicholas Roeg's 1990 adaptation of Roald Dahl's The Witches is, Roeg ended up at considerable loggerheads with Dahl when it came to shooting the ending. See, Dahl's book ends with the boy protagonist never being turned back from a mouse into a human, though Alan Scott's script for Rogue's film changed the ending to have him be miraculously transformed back into a person. As you might imagine, Dahl was infuriated when he heard about this, and so as a compromise, the director agreed to film two versions of the ending, one accurate to the book, and the other as written by screenwriter Scott. Despite Dahl allegedly being moved to tears by seeing his filmed version, test audiences ultimately were far more favourable towards the sentimental new ending, and so that's the one Rogue went with. This, of course, upset Dahl enough that he demanded his name to be removed from the credits and later called the film, quote, utterly appalling. Though Robert Zemeckis' recent remake is working practically every single way, its ending is slightly more faithful to the book, in so much as the boy actually stays a mouse for the rest of his life. Number 5. The Spider Pit, King Kong 1933. Those who attended test screenings of the monster movie could never have known that they would become witnesses to ephemeral cinematic history, as this more violent and terrifying version was never screened publicly ever again. Though numerous scenes were cut, the sequence where King Kong hurls various crew members onto a canyon floor where they're devoured by giant insects, spiders, and even a tentacle creature resulted in especially adverse reactions from test audiences of the time. Viewers allegedly fainted and were otherwise distracted from subsequent scenes due to the horrific nature of this sequence, and so co-director Merian C. Cooper decided to personally cut the scene from the film. Sadly, the much sought-after scene is lost to the ages by now, though Peter Jackson's 2005 remake did feature a modern take on the idea, and Jackson also created a home video extra where he attempted to replicate the original scene using the few remaining pre-production drawings and photos. Number 4. Minos probably killed Zoe's parents, Escape Room. 2019's Escape Room wasn't a great movie, but it did certainly end with an entertainingly over-the-top finale, albeit one which was intended to be even sillier were it not for test audiences. The theatrical cut ends with an amusing fake-out where the evil Minos Escape Rooms company is seen preparing an escape room that resembles a plane, which they plan to capture surviving heroes Zoe and Ben with. Shortly after the film's release, though, director Adam Robertel confirmed that he filmed a different quote-unquote more nihilistic ending, which was negatively received by test audiences. The director said, quote, "In full disclosure, we had a test screening of an original ending which was much more nihilistic, where Zoe ends up going back to her dorm room. She's being gaslit, obviously, and she finds a clue in one of her puzzle books that leads her back to the academic hall when we first met her. And underneath her desk, she finds a little note from the puzzle maker and her mother's compass pendant. It was really fucked up, also implying that Minos maybe even had something to do with her mother's plane crash." End quote. Number 3. 4 different endings, The Fly 1986. David Cronenberg's The Fly concludes with an abrupt yet emotionally shattering final scene where Ronnie puts her increasingly mutated human fly hybrid lover Seth out of his misery with a shotgun blast to the head. The film quickly ends without any sort of epilogue detailing the fallout of Seth's demise or the outcome of Ronnie being pregnant with his possibly mutated baby. During post-production, Cronenberg was struggling to settle on an ending at all, and so he actually shot 4 separate epilogues which were all test screened with various audiences. One saw Ronnie get back with her former lover where she's carrying his child, and there was another one where they're back together but she's not pregnant, and finally one where Veronica is single and pregnant, suggesting that she's kept Seth's child. However, not a single one of these endings was well received by test audiences, possibly aided by the fact that all of them were interlinked with a candid dream sequence featuring a human baby with butterfly wings. In the end, Cronenberg felt that test audiences were left so utterly shocked by Seth's death that the film didn't really have anywhere else to go, hence why it ends so suddenly. Number 2. Tree possibly dies for real. Happy Death Day. Happy Death Day ends in relatively concrete fashion, with protagonist Tree having captured and killed the masked murderer and consequently escaping the focal time loop. But writer-director Christopher Landon actually shot a bleaker original ending where Tree breaks the loop but ends up in hospital where she's killed by Stephanie Butler, the wife of the professor Tree is having an affair with. Here, Stephanie kills Tree in revenge, ending the film on an ambiguous note where she's either dead for good this time or caught in yet another time loop. Basically, if the film made no money, she'd be dead, but if it did, the sequel bait was firmly laid. Test audiences, though, loathe this because it denied Tree a cathartic happy ending, prompting Landon to throw it out and end with her and Carter happily reunited. This cleared the path for the sequel as well, Happy Death Day to You, to have the Butlers actually appear as the killers. That original ending does sound pretty fun though. Number 1. Hercules is castrated, Freaks, 1932. And finally, we have Todd Browning's classic 1932 horror film Freaks, which was significantly cut down from its original 90-minute form to just 64 minutes due to negative reactions from test screenings. Surely the most infamous scene to get the chop, for lack of a better term, though, was one that occurs shortly after Hercules is captured. In the 90-minute cut, it's revealed that his captors turned Hercules into a castrator, that is, they cut off his balls, as is revealed when his voice is shown to be that of a tenor. Considering that the 64-minute film is hardly restrained as it is kind of strange what was cut and what was left, but at the same time, this specifically was clearly just way too much for audiences of almost 90 years ago to handle.